20,000 people surrounding the county commission chambers and let the chairman of the county commission come out and explain it to us that, look, people, you are just slaves. You don't have any rights. Forget about it. Go home and be a quiet slave. If that's their position, we need to know about it. Would you be willing to get in touch with Orlando and see about writing a column on some of this material?
I might put that under consideration. I don't have any problem with writing for Orlando and the Tribune or any of the other individuals down there. And
great.
You have the ability to put paper to pen.
That's super. Well, I'd like to thank you for calling, and I want to get back to the rest of the story on what I heard yesterday. It hits home when you know the people that are involved. But even if you don't know them, folks, you can't wait until your relative or your loved one or your friend gets attacked, because if you don't care about others that are being attacked, who's going to care when they come for you? We've learned that lesson before. Let's not forget it. So I'd like to get back to this. I appreciate your call, and I hope to be speaking to you in the days ahead. You have a great day.
America. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, let's get back to where we were. Let me back it up just a little. We may have missed a part of a sentence there when the gentleman called. It caught me off guard. I was sleeping at the switch. I apologize. Let's get back to the archived version of the interview with Peter Schiff about his father, Irwin Schiff.
Do it for everybody. No, you don't. You got an 87-year-old guy that can barely walk and is legally blind. Take the cuffs off him. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, if it's a 30-year-old convicted pedophile, child rapist, chain him up the wall and punch him in the stomach. I mean, I'm being sarcastic, but obviously a blind guy with cancer, you don't need to chain him down.
No, and especially when you have two armed guards. Where's he going to go? It is insane, but this is government. This is how government operates. This is how government functions. That's why you want to absolutely limit government to its smallest possible capacity. That's what the founding fathers tried to do with the Constitution. My father tried to stand up for that document and force the government to abide by it because the courts have let the government get away with murder. And in this case, they are getting away with murder because they're murdering my dad.
Well, I know it must be hard for you. Did you tell them folks on the outside are rooting for him and that people are reading this book more than ever?
I did tell him. I told him I was going to go on your show and I was going to talk about it. He wants to get the word out there. He wants people to understand what's going on in this country. And I tell you, I've never seen him or listened to him more negative about what he thinks is going to happen economically. I mean, he is really, really worried.
Tell us what your dad has to say. He's a smart guy. Tell us.
Well, he couldn't say much because he's losing his short-term memory. So a lot of the things he just kept saying to me over and over again without any recollection that he had already told me. But he's very concerned about the financial position of the U.S. economy and what's going to happen when the dollar collapses or the Fed has to, or the Congress has to admit that they can't make Social Security payments, they can't make any of these payments, and there's, riots and food shortages and energy blackouts. I mean, he's really, really nervous about the civil unrest that he sees developing in the United States as a result of this problem blowing up. But I think, we can get in a later segment, the next one, and talk about, what's going on in the economy and the Fed.
Sure, well, I skipped the break. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. I'm not going to even play the clips. You're on record at Europac.com. You were on record being criticized in the national media for saying they will not raise interest rates, and now they haven't raised interest rates. Break that down, and the latest that you were on a month ago.
Well, first of all, the important thing is the excuse, right? Because everybody is still buying the lie. This is part of the show. So Janet Yellen came out and said, okay, we were going to raise interest rates, but now we're not because of China. We're worried about these problems overseas, and so we're not going to raise rates. And the media buys it, right? But that's not the truth. Janet Yellen is lying. I said this in the beginning, that they are going to come up with one excuse after another. And it doesn't even matter what the excuse is. It's whatever makes the most sense at the time. Whatever is the most convenient, that's what they're going to blame it on. Because look what Janet Yellen said, the same playbook. She said, we're not raising rates now, but we may raise them in October. Well, that's in 6 weeks. Well, if the Fed is so worried about the problems in China, they're not going to go away in the next 6 weeks. Why not say we're not raising rates in October either? Because that's not their playbook. The script they've been operating under is pretend we're going to raise interest rates in the future, but the reason for this is to make believe that there's a real reality and that they're confident they can raise rates, and they come up excuse after another why they don't raise them, because if they ever did raise them, it would pierce the recovery myth, because the air would come out of the bubble that much faster. We'd be right back in a recession. We'd have another financial crisis, and they'd be doing QE4, and they would look like fools.
And to show how disconnected they are, even the Fed head up in Omaha thinks they're really going to raise it in the next few months. To show how the New York Fed is keeping the other Fed groups out of the loop, break down how that whole group works, because people think it's just one unified Federal Reserve. They don't understand how the real board works.
Well, you have various member banks. You have different people that are part of the Federal Open Market Committee, so they all have a voice. But I think it's easy to dissent if you know that the majority is going to make sure that your dissenting opinion doesn't actually happen, right? So it's easy to say, hey, I think we should raise rates, when you know everybody else is going to make sure that rates don't go up, right? So then you could look like you're the responsible one, but everybody else is preventing the rate hike. But I'm sure even the guys that say they want to raise rates, if it came right down to it and their vote was the deciding vote, they don't want to raise rates because that will expose the myth. Right? The Fed wants to pretend they can raise rates because theoretically raising rates is a sign that everything is better, right? But they want to pretend everything is better without proving it.
So you accurately hit the nail on the head, and you told CNBC, and we put the article up as video, you said, just last week, you said, I predicted what the Fed would do correctly. Now I'm going to predict what the stocks are going to do. Let's get into that.
Well, I actually never said anything about what the stock market was going to do on that interview, but I do believe that the
Sure, well, that's our headline. Let me give you the headline then so you know. We'll put it back on screen. It's, if I'm right about the Fed, I'll be right about stocks. So what's that about?
Yeah, they got the headline on stocks, but the only thing I did say is that I thought that the stock market needed a fall, which is what I believe. I think that just keeping interest rates at zero is not enough for the market. This market is really propped up. It needs air. It needs QE4 to stop from the...
It needs the Fed to keep buying the bonds, right?
Well, absolutely. The Fed has to expand its balance sheet in the market. And like that, it's not going to... But it also wants to prop up the banks. It wants to prop up the real estate market. This reminds me a lot. What's going on now? You go back to 2006. I'm going to put together another video of some of these clips bubble, which was so incredibly obvious to me and should have been obvious to everybody, but it wasn't. What was going on in bubble burst, so incredible, and how it's going to resolve. This now, and are they just lying to cover it up?
Sure, let me ask this question. Damn if you do, damn if you don't. We're going to break in 1 minute, but try to answer an hour after. Explain to people how it's bad if we... Peter Schiff's our guest, and I know we got warfare when he's exempt from taxes and above the law, and they got headlines about Obama basking in the aura. I mean, I'm going to... really sickening to have a Marxist Pope. I mean, we're in deep trouble. I mean, that's all I can say is we are in deep trouble. It's bad now. Wait till they bring in more government control, more taxes. This is really bad news. Stay with us.
Take a slight break now. If any might have alternatives or Irwin's health or whether you're concerned about it. Commercial out so we don't have to go. 0711 702 983 0711. And I'll give you a little while while I'm adjusting. Folks, and we all need to be a remedy. unpopular with the government. You know, Alex says we're in trouble. I hope you're coming to the same conclusion. We haven't lost freedom of speech yet, and you can hear what you have to say. But the number to call obviously is 702-983-0611. We'll return to after the commercial here. And
from Euro Pacific Capital. The website, of course, is on screen. That's why for 4 or 5 years we've had My Patriot Supply. They started 6-7 years ago to become in the top 3 in the country. Low pricing, high quality. We have the entire line of My Patriot Supply. Their latest discounts, they're changed every week at info. Store.com. When you purchase it there, it helps support this broadcast. I want to thank you for that. But we're now exact same food. They're able to give us even lower price. It's the lowest price they've ever offered in their history. I've had their CEO on 2 weeks ago. They've extended 1 week because it was going to end in just a couple days. They're extending it till October 1st, and this introductory lowest price ever on the highest quality storable foods will end. You can call and ask questions about it, or you can go to InfoWars. 888-253-3139. The elite food, they've got emergency tanks. They're digging in. I see them in the London Guardian and the New York Times. I'm not saying everything set up. I'm saying this is important insurance to have, just like car insurance. More important. And whether it's high quality non-GMO seed at InfoWarsStore.com or high quality water filters or the Life Straw payment, the very best peace of mind is there. Whatever we use, what we promote, InfoWarsSelect.com.
I decided to include Alex's commercial there. I hope you'll consider taking a look at InfoWars, seeing if there's any products you can use at that location. You know, one of the important factors that I continue to encounter is the fact that we may not be able to vote a public servant into office. It may be too late for that. Some people think that it is. But you can vote with your dollars. Alex has on a lady named foodbabe.com. I would encourage you to go to that website, foodbabe.com/Subway Meat or Meats. She started a campaign. I went to the site the other day, signed up, signed her petition. Can you imagine this lady? Oh, wow, I bet Subway would like to have her locked up. She thinks that the chemicals in the meats shouldn't be there. They're causing cancer, causing illness and disease, terrible problems in the human body. You know, and why are they putting it in the animals? Because it makes the animals bigger and they can sell it for more money. Always trace the money, folks. But she's doing a heck of a job, and you can too. Any of us can if we just get off our assets, get off the bench, and get in the game. Let's return to Peter and Erwin on the interview. Hope you're enjoying it. Thank you. Bye.
The rehabilitation center, right? Your life is going to change in the short run, and it's going to get a whole lot worse, right? Apparently, I guess if you're doing drugs, you're having a good time. That's maybe why you're taking drugs. You feel great, you're high. But if you make a decision that you want to kick that habit and you go to rehab, now you're going through withdrawal, right? You're not, going to Club Med. You're not going to have a good time. You're going to have to, adjust to a normal life, and so that means a big change in the way you live your life. But it's better than continuing to do drugs and then maybe being dead in a hospital bed of an overdose. And that's where we are. We've got this phony economy that's propped up on this monetary heroin, and we need to stop. We need to, we need to go into economic rehab. That's what would happen if the Fed raised rates. It wouldn't be fun, but it would be a positive step. It would be a healing experience as we restructure the economy. What would that look like? It would mean that we had to stop spending money, tear up our credit cards, live within our means, asset prices would come down like stocks and real estate. A lot of banks
that's
would
the good
fail.
part is that what we need would get cheaper.
Well, yeah, the cost of living would go down. Oh, look, home ownership is at the lowest it's been since 1967. It's like a 48-year low. But if you take out the older people, for young people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, it's never been this low. Why? Because real estate prices are too high. Well, if the government lets the bubble pop, real estate prices will plunge, and a lot of people who are renting might be able to afford to buy a house. A lot of things will become more affordable.
This economy is only good for the engineers at the top who know where the market's going to go, who get the money first. They're the ones riding the bubbles. All the rest of us get screwed by it.
But, a lot of things are going to change. But right now, Americans, we buy a lot of stuff on credit. We have a lot of cheap stuff coming in from China. We take it for granted. But it's going to change. Americans are going to have to stop throwing things out and buying new stuff. We're going to have to repair the stuff that we have because we don't have the factories anymore. And we can't keep borrowing money to import the things that other people produce with their factories. So this is going to be a painful adjustment process back to a viable economy that grows based on underconsumption, saving, and investment, where the consuming is the reward for the economic growth, the production and the savings. We've got it backwards. We claim that we're a consumer-based economy. You can't have an economy based on consumption. It's a disaster. It's a bubble, which is what we have. But the Fed wants to perpetuate this. The Fed doesn't want anybody going to rehab. The Fed doesn't want people realizing that that's where we need to be. They want to keep the party going. They want to keep the high going. So they are going to come back with more QE. They are going to keep rates at zero, but they don't want to admit that that's what they're doing. So they have to come up with excuses and reasons.
Well, I have to say, you didn't just predict, and I'm not kissing your butt here, it's true. You didn't just predict that they wouldn't raise it. You explained years ago what the rope-a-dope was, the philosophy, and now that I look at it, you can really see them teasing people and creating this illusion, but then always pushing it out. How long do you think till they do finally raise it, or have they decided to just never do it? How far will they inflate this currency?
Well, I think their plan, if they can pull it off, is not to raise rates and then to have some bad stuff happen, and they can say, we were ready to do it, everything was working, everything was going great, but something happened that nobody could have possibly anticipated, and because of this crazy event that happened somewhere in the world, we're going to have to postpone what we were going to do. We're going to have to do QE4 because everything we know it works because it has worked. And the whole idea of talking about raising rates allows the Fed to claim victory, right? They get to have their cake and eat it too, because they can claim, everything is great, we're going to raise rates, but they don't actually raise rates because the easy part is bringing rates to zero. Any central bank can do that. The impossible part is lifting them back up again once you've got everybody addicted to zero.
Sure. What does it signify that China is moving out of U.S. treasuries? What does that signify?
Well, I think the Chinese are smart. I think they can read the writing that Americans can't. I think they have a lot of treasuries, and they want to get rid of them. And I think it's not have countries all around the world that have loaded up on treasuries. They're going to sell.
Is that the beginning of moving towards the exits? Because you've been saying the last few years that when we see them starting to dump U.S. bonds, that's the big sign.
I think it is a big sign. And, right now there's still speculators buying the dollar on the idea that the U.S. economy is sound and that the Fed's going to raise rates. But it's all because the Fed says it is. I mean, if you actually look at all the economic data that comes out every day, it's weak. The data hasn't been this weak since the Great Recession. Yet nobody pays attention to the actual data. They just look at Janet Yellen. And as long as Janet Yellen says everything is great, nobody cares what the data is. They're all waiting for the Pied Piper, Janet Yellen. It's like, the emperor has no clothes. No one wants to admit the emperor's naked until Janet Yellen says it.
Let me ask you this, and I want to go to some phone calls. You're making you put your crystal ball cap on. I know you're not making a prediction here, but in your gut, what you tell your wife, what you tell your family, what you're telling our audience now, how do you see this going down the next 6 months? What do you see happening this fall? A lot of folks like Dent and others have been pretty accurate like you. They think it's imminent. That it's going to get a lot worse a lot quicker. But we know they've got a lot of weird tricks up their sleeves. The market's so rigged now, interest rates, the stock market, that they can, suspend reality for a while longer, kind of like Wile E. Coyote runs out over the cliff, and for a minute he doesn't fall because he's not really in the real world. He's being drawn by Mel Blanc.
Well, it's not until he looks down that he realizes he's no longer on the ground. And
Exactly.
I think that Wile E. Coyote phenomenon is going to happen because a lot of Americans don't realize there's nothing beneath their feet but air. And what's keeping it going is just the Fed's credibility. But how much longer can it maintain credibility by bluffing it's going to raise rates but never delivering? And if it actually does deliver on a rate hike, it's just going to accelerate the collapse that much further, because if the Fed does raise rates by a quarter point, the markets are going to start anticipating the next quarter and the next quarter, and it's going to unravel even faster. So they're damned that they do and they're there that they don't, which is why I think they're going to take the path of least resistance, which is leave rates at zero and keep pretending they're going to raise them until there's something that happens where they have to do QE4. And maybe it's going to be the jobs numbers. I mean, at some point, these job numbers are going to turn south with everything else. I mean, all the other data has already turned to recession. The only thing left is the employment data, and that's coming.
But don't they admit most of the employment numbers are cooked anyways?
They don't admit that, although Janet Yellen, even in her last statement, when they didn't raise rates, she said, we're still waiting to see improvement in the labor market. What improvement is she waiting for? If the unemployment rate is as low as it is, and the employment market is as great as she says it is, why does she need to improve more? That just proves she's lying. She knows that the labor market is lousy, and if it's lousy now in September, it ain't going to be any better in October or December. In fact, it's probably going to be worse.
Well, do you think Dent and others are right then? Do they think by later this fall or winter we're going to see a huge stock market plunge?
Well, look, I don't think the Federal Reserve is going to allow a huge stock market plunge. I think at some point, if it looks like the market is in danger of that big a decline, QE4 is going to be announced. So they're not going to allow their own bubble to deflate. They've spent years blowing air into it. They're not going to let it, implode. So she's going to stop the stock market from collapsing. If I thought that the Fed was actually going to raise rates the way everybody believes they're going to do, then the stock market would crash, and maybe Dent would be right. But if the Fed does what I believe they're going to do, and comes with more QE, then it's the dollar that's going to crash, not the stock market. And in fact, what's putting pressure on all the emerging markets, commodities, gold, is the belief that the Fed is going to tighten monetary policy. That's what's crushing the entire world. And until Janet Yellen admits she's not going to do that, then it's not going to change. And the irony of it is, Janet Yellen is saying, I don't want to raise rates because of the problems overseas. The problems overseas are because she's going to raise rates, or everybody thinks she's going to raise rates.
It's like CNBC.
Which she can't.
It's like CNBC famously a few years ago said, aren't we all just slaves of central banks? And then they cut the 5 guests all agreeing. This is really, I guess, the great question. Now can central banks and bureaucrats suspend economic reality? And can they pump a bubble up to Zimbabwe proportions and not have any blowback from that? And I just think common sense says it can't.
Now, look, all bubbles pop. And the problem is the bigger they get before they pop, the more damage when they pop. And this is the biggest one yet. And remember, people, I was on That's what happens. That's what happened with the housing bubble. And again, I'm not the only one, but there are not that many of us. But yes, I was right, and almost everybody was wrong. All the big banks, including the Federal Reserve, including Janet Yellen, were completely oblivious to the housing bubble and any of the consequences that were going to hit the economy when that bubble burst. I laid it out exactly the way it happened. Sure. And here we are again. Fast forward 2015. It's the same.
Could it be Chicago?
The same answer.
Could it be LA? Could it be Puerto Rico going bankrupt? I mean, we don't know what the trigger. War with Russia? I mean, who knows what could trigger this thing going crazy?
Well, look, just the threat of higher interest rates is what's doing it after 7 years of 0%. But my point is, we are around the corner from a much worse economic crisis than 2008. But 2008 was still big. It was the worst downturn since the Great Depression, and nobody in the halls of power saw it.
Nobody wants to see it.
Nobody in Wall Street, nobody at the Fed, nobody. Just a handful of people that they thought were crackpots. Some of those crackpots got very rich, but very few people saw it. And now it's the same situation all over again.
I agree. I want to go to some calls here on the pond if I get your take after we take one or two, because it ties in economically. His answer is for government. Desi, in Louisiana, you're on the air. Thanks for.
Yes, folks. I'll stop it right there. Tomorrow we'll hear after they take the calls. Maybe we'll go ahead and listen to the Popes, the public's Alex Jones listeners, the Info Warriors take on the Pope, because that's an interesting situation that we're facing right now. What is this guy doing here, and why is he telling us, one of the largest economic wealth centers on the planet, telling us that what we need to do to spend our money, what we should take on as far as refugees. And I know I listened to Michael Savage yesterday. He had a long-time devout Catholic email that was sent to Michael Savage by a friend of his also, and he said that this guy has infiltrated the Catholic Church. There's a lot of very little actual support for him ascending to the position of Pope, and he definitely doesn't represent the bulk or majority of Catholics. So don't be confused when you hear what the Pope is saying. You don't. I know I heard just before I came on today. You don't have to be afraid to be accused of not being a proper Catholic just because you don't support every single tenet of socialism. Of course, all isms end in the same spot, folks. When you really start getting into it, and it ends in complete and total control, all of them, called fascism. They all wind up telling you what to do with your life, where you're going to go, how you're going to spend your money, what you're going to do. The only question is whether or not this country is going to put up with it. We've had a long run so far, and I know the basic tenets of freedom and liberty are still, at least in this state, somewhere out there. I know we heard them from the caller that we had today. I'm hoping that we'll have some more callers tomorrow. We'll start with the end of the calls regarding the Pope, and maybe you'll enjoy that. And then Peter holds over till the first 5 minutes of the next hour. So we'll go on to that. Erwin had asked him to stick around and explore the possibilities of what could be done. The people that used to be on Erwin's call-in talk show on a regular basis, I had the privilege of handling those calls from time to time when we had people on vacation. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do it. It made it a lot easier when Rolando stepped forward. Got a couple minutes left. I want to. One thing that popped up as we approached the end of the hour is I want to encourage you all to not to take a show like this for granted, not to take your freedom and liberty for granted, your future of you and your children and your community. The German people did that in the Adolf Hitler days. The Chinese people did that in the Mao's China. The Russian people did it in Stalin's time in the Soviet Union. And it led to some bad things. And bad things are not good. Let's try to be optimistic as much as we can. I've always believed that the foundation of this country was divinely inspired. I think there is a higher power that is working behind the scenes. And I never think that things are as bad as some people say they are, because I know that the one thing that this current president had right, as far as I'm concerned, is there is such a thing as change. It may not be his change, but things can change. And sometimes the forces of evil, I think, set in motion a plan that is modified for the good of the people on this planet. And I know one thing, it's just like J. Edward Griffin says, we got to get in the water, we've got to brave the water, because we've got to get started. Even if we don't know the answer to all the minute questions or the smaller questions, we know one thing that's for sure. We have to have the Federal Reserve abolished. This is the 4th time that we've had this happen to our country. What has happened? This is the longest period of time that we've put up with it. And we're going to have to do something about it in the days ahead. So I hope you're on board. I hope you cease to sit on the bench and pick up the phone and start calling in. I'll be in tomorrow. So this is Stephen signing off from Las Vegas. Hope you enjoyed today's hour. I sure did. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.
Fucking busy.
Well, I'm page 5 in your motion.
That's it?
Well, there's only 7, I think. No, just over 6. Only got a page or 2.5 more to go. I'll be done by tomorrow.
What happened?
Right now, I got you a money line on victory of this case is about the same as you defeating Floyd Mayweather. That's of this.
Oh yeah? So I got a fucking United States Supreme Court decision
In this procedure. And I don't think that you recognized it yet. I mean, I'll help you. Need to talk about it, what it's going to take, because some of the areas this procedure I don't understand. I don't know. I haven't got sufficient experience to guarantee that you can win, and I don't play if I don't guarantee, because I know I wouldn't expect to get paid. You can lose by yourself. I'm not the only way I expect to get paid is if we win, and I'm just offering you an objective evaluation. Could I be wrong? Anybody can be.
I don't know what the fuck is going on.
But I think we've done enough talking so far that I don't think we're that far away from putting together something good, but I wouldn't even consider filing this until I get it modified. That would be my recommendation. But since I just happen to know one of the top in the state, I know if I could talk him into it, we could get it done. So we'll talk tomorrow, if that's okay. If you want to. Have a good day.
Good afternoon, folks. This is Clark Feely with The Herd, coming at you live from Las Vegas. just finishing the wake-up call. Ready to go. About what we're going to do about straightening this country out, because climate warming and everything, which I don't think that's a solution to any of our in this country, because I think in the last umpteen years, we're not even talking about a degree temperature increase, and sometimes the temperature goes down. And I think lately the temperature's been going down, it hasn't been increasing. So that's the reason that the progressive changed the word from climate warming to climate change, because the scientific data wasn't supporting their theory anymore. So they had to change the name. Of course, that's what they do when they lie, and everything is their modus operandi. When they're caught in their lies, they just change the wording and say, well, we didn't call it climate, we didn't climate warming, it's climate change. You know, they scramble around and they just misname things to start with. A perfect example is Obamacare. Well, Obamacare is a total misnomer if there ever was one, because what is it caring for? It's not Obamacare. It's mandatory health insurance. The government forced you to buy something that they had no right to do. And our illustrious Supreme Court got a decision wrong and called it a tax. Now, if you recall back when Obama was pushing this illegal scheme, it wasn't called a tax. They couldn't call it a tax, or they couldn't jam it down our throats. So they had to call it something else. So now the Supreme Court, without putting on their pants and not doing it, they decided to call it a tax after all that. So everything in this country, folks, when you have humans controlling it, humans are subject to politics, let's call it that. And politics are corruption. And that's the problem we face today, is everything in this world has been corrupted, or at least America has. And we have to get that straightened out, because boy, oh boy, we are in trouble. And the way to straighten it out, the first step in my book, is to get rid of the political parties. They're corrupt organizations. They steal the people that we try to send to represent us. They don't represent us. They end up representing the parties and special interest groups, and that's what happens. And that's what Donald Trump is running on, a platform where he's going to not take any money. He's going to use his own money, so he's not going to be bought and paid for like one Jeb Bush or any of the other people running. Are all raising money, scrambling around, trying to get dollars. And that becomes a corrupted organization that will never represent the people of this country. And there's so many things wrong that we have to start. We have to get people together. We have to discuss it. We have to have forums, and we have to go from there and try to get this country on the right path. That's very important, to start going down the right path. We don't have to get to the end of the road right off the bat, but we sure do need to start going in the right direction, because for the last 7 years, we've been going 180 degrees in the wrong direction. And as a result, when that happens to other countries, it takes them decades to straighten out a disaster like that. Japan went through something like that. It took them 20 years to try to get on the right track again. And one can only pray and hope that we don't end up in that kind of situation after we get this monster out of the White House. Been the most destructive administration that's ever been in this country, and I think we've had a couple in the past that haven't come anything close to this one, but they certainly have hurt us, and took us a while to get those straightened out. But we were able to straighten some things out, I think, under the Reagan administration. He lowered taxes dramatically. He created more jobs than anybody else ever had, I think. And just those policies alone helped to get things going down the right track. And boy, do we need a track like that now, because we have so many people out of work. We've had progressives in charge for so long that the numbers coming out of Washington are all distorted. When they try to float a unemployment rate of some 5%, just look around. I mean, it's a long way from 5%. More intelligent people than what are coming out of Washington have estimated that we're looking at an unemployment rate at the minimum in double digits, like the teens, and more likely over 20%. And I think that, from what I can see and hear, and all these college kids getting out of college looking for work, and they're living with their parents, and it just goes on and on. The signs are very, very bad. And then you have Obama policies where you got people coming in, illegal aliens on tops of trains, and now we have Syrians flooding this country, and everything is just out of order. And we have no order anymore, and we have to restore that before we've completely lost our country. And it won't take much more. I think we've lost California, for example. I think it's totally liberal and controlled to a good part by a lot of these illegal aliens, and who somehow vote. I mean, I don't know, you can't have any ID when you go to vote, but boy, you sure do need ID when you buy everything else. So, and of course, that's a progressive policy, because they don't want to have anyone have to identify themselves before they vote, because then they can't fix the elections. I mean, everything these people do is out of need and their need for power, and they do everything. They have no morals. They'll do anything that it takes, anything at all, to stay in power. And this is why we have to get rid of them. And I think get rid of them for good. And the way to do that is to eliminate these parties. Why do you need a party? Tell me why we need parties. What do they do for the people of this country? They don't do anything for the people. They just create power for themselves. And that's corruption. And we need to get rid of that. So why can't a guy named Smith and a guy named Jones run for a particular office, and may the man that has the best ideas win? Simple as that. Take money out of the game, have town halls, have meetings, have whatever it takes for these people to start on the path to electability. And then at some point, when they've reached a certain level, they can have access to government-funded campaigns that are equal in nature to what parties. Let's say Smith and Jones end up being the candidates of relative choice, and give them each X amount of dollars equally from the taxpayers, so that the money comes from us. It doesn't come from some special interest group that's going to buy their allegiance and buy their votes and buy the legislation and everything else that they're going to be in charge of. They'll be working for the people, and the people put them in office, and the people can take them out of office. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way our forefathers founded this country. So let's get that in play. Let's get rid of these parties. We'll be no worse off for it. We'll be much, much, much better for it. And we'll go from there. And let Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith fight it out with equal amounts of money, and whoever has the best ideas will surface, and the people will respond accordingly. And then if Mr. Smith, let's say, goes off to Washington, where have I heard that before? But anyways, and he does a good job, maybe we have a system set up to where we re-elect him again for another term. But I think that should be it. 2 terms, and thank you very much for serving your country. And we'll send you back to wherever you came from, and you can continue whatever you were doing before you became a congressman or a senator or what have you. And thanks again. And then we elect somebody new. We don't need these entrenched people that get power, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is what we have to be very, very fearful of. And our forefathers warned us that political parties were a very bad, detrimental thing. And over the 200 years that we've been in existence, boy, have we seen that come true. So it's time to clean house, folks. It's time to get rid of these parties. time to get our country back, and time to do something that's right for us again, because we're just getting trampled on by everything. And take the legal system, for example. It's been destroyed. It's been hijacked by greedy lawyers who have to pay the light bill or what have you, and they've been sport over the years. And now there's a bad economy going on, so these people get desperate, and desperate people do desperate things, and they start stealing. And what control do we ever have over them anyways? What are these billing hours? How do you determine who you're working for when? How does a client ever know what this lawyer is doing on their behalf? They get bills like crazy, and when the lawyer is billing a client, he's charging for billing the client. So I just went through a case here in Nevada, and there were hours and hours and hours and hours billed as a result of these lawyers fighting over the bills. A lawyer submits an outrageous bill, for example, where he charged 122 hours in one day. He charged 40 hours himself for every day that we were at trial. And never did we have a trial go 8 hours, let alone 40 hours. Hold on, you're on the air.
Hi, my name is Wendy from Solar Energy Solutions.
Yeah, you're on the air right now. You're on a radio show.
Application.
Goodbye. Boy, I tell you what, another one of my solutions is to get rid of telemarketers, because we get inundated. We have so many phones around here, they literally ring off the hook with people trying to sell us. And they're robocalls, like that person, they weren't there. They just ravel on, and then you know, if someone is listening, maybe a live person will come on at some point, but very rarely. And or you get a call from a live, hi, how are you today? You know, make me sick. Anyways, I was talking about lawyers and the despicability of how they charge. And in my particular case, I'm just unexplainable how many hours and hours and hours were racked up on billing. For example, the defendant lawyer in this particular case put in a bill for $600,000 at the end of the trial, and their client had been found liable. They lost the case. The client was removed as a trustee, and lo and behold, the records that we produced showed that they had misappropriated funds amounting to about $50,000, and the bill that this obscene lawyer submitted was $600,000. Now that is absolutely outrageous. Now, just prior to the trial in June, the year before the trial started in January of 2012, in June of 2011, this same lawyer had submitted a bill trying to get money from the court to pay his legal fees, because his client had no money and never would have any money and never has had any money in her life. And he took her on as a client because she represented herself to be a trustee of a trust that was worth a couple $1 million. Well, that's the reason this greedy ambulance-chasing lawyer took the case, and that was the only reason, that he thought he might have a big payday at some point. So, at any rate, he lost the case. He submits a bill that's absolutely outrageous, and the June attempt of his to get paid from the court declared his legal fees at that time of $18,000, which was ridiculous because he hadn't done anything really in that time. All he's done is submit fraudulent documents that his client was portraying to be bank statements and so forth that were actually made on a home-generated computer, spreadsheet type thing, which were phonier than hell. There's no way you can pass that garbage off as anything legitimate. And he would turn around and submit it to the court. Well, that's fraud. So that's all he did for this $18,000 in assumed legal fees or whatnot. Anyways, the court turned him down at that time, and that was June. That was about 6-7 months before the trial kicked off. Well, at the end of the trial, it lasted into June, and only that because the judge was sick, sometimes for a month at a crack, and or had other things to do, and we kept getting put off, and we'd have a hearing today, and maybe not another one for a week, or maybe we'd have a couple in a row, one of them a half a day. So it was just a pathetic attempt at any kind of justice, because we weren't getting anything even close to it. So anyways, his bill at that time was $18,000. Now, 1 year later, at the end of this trial, his bill had escalated to $600,000. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with what lawyers make, but this particular lawyer probably never made $200,000 in his career, because he was a complete moron. And I looked at his record and looked at the cases, and they were dog bite cases, and ambulance chases, accident things, and even looking through those cases, I didn't notice any that he had really prevailed in. This guy was pathetic. At any rate, so now all of a sudden, out of the blue, he's entitled to $600,000 in 1 year, and supposedly he was doing other things too in that same time frame, because he wasn't just working on this case. Matter of fact, the records that he ended up submitting were all phonied up, because all he did was take some emails that I had sent to family members that were kind of long and extensive, putting details of what had transpired throughout this particular proceedings and so forth. And all he did was put notes next to paragraphs saying that he read the paragraph and it took 15 minutes, and this other paragraph took 10 minutes, and this paragraph over here took 15 minutes. And that was the basis of his bill, was more or less reading these emails. Anyways, this was absolute fraud committed by this guy before the court, because he never did any work. It was never any work apparent in the work that he did during the trial. The questions he asked were all pathetic and everything. And let's see who we got here. You're on the air with the Herd.
Hey, this is Aaron. I'm out here in front of People's United Bank in Bridgeport.
Well, that sounds like a great place to be. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. Just out here doing it.
Well, what do you have to report to us? We have listeners here that have been waiting to hear how things are going. I've been talking a little bit about the trial and the despicability of one Howard Reuteman's bills of $600,000 and things of that nature, and 122 hours in a day. So anyways, you know that story. What do you got to say?
Oh, I got done. I just got done talking about 20 minutes ago to a couple, two young ladies that work here at the bank, and it turns out that Dan Karen is how you pronounce his name, and I might have to remind you that's the guy that signed the stipulation agreement. Him and Howard Reutemann were the only two signatures on that stipulation agreement, and those girls knew him. And they said that, you know, he got that good job, which you and I already know that he works out in New York at E-Trade. And I asked the girls, like, do you know whether he got fired or whether he quit? And they go, no, he quit. He knew he got a good job. Like, he left to go do the other job. And I was like, all right. I go, well, I just find it very, very ironic that he doesn't work here, you know, 2 or 3 weeks after he signed that agreement. And I find it even more ironic that he didn't get a signature from the legitimate trustee or a fake one, at best.
What they had to say about that?
Oh, they were floored on all accounts on all the topics, whether it was jurisdiction, whether it was, you know, a cashier's check not being honored, whether you know, whatever it was laughable. Sorry about that. I'm still on the streets out here. Yeah, and I was trying to think what that lady's name was, the one that they said they were going to see if it's even a lienable attack because it's a trust. What was that guy's name? It was like Chikalis or something, Angie Chikalis?
Well, there was a Susan Chikalis that told the bank or the court that the bank could not stop payment on a cashier's check. That's what she
said?
That's what she said on the billing records and so forth. She told Reutemann and Derby that.
Did she work in the trust department?
She worked in the bank as one of the account managers, if you will, for the branch in Wolfboro. And I knew her. I knew her for years and years, and so did my mother.
Oh. All right. I was under the impression because this one girl that I was speaking to a little bit ago, she worked in the trust department here at the bank in Bridgeport.
Okay, there was another person that responded to that freeze or that writ of attachment or whatever it was on the trust account, and the clerk that signed that responded that they didn't know what this was and hadn't had any time to look at their legal department to see what the status of the account was that they were trying to freeze, whether it may be exempt or what have you. They hadn't even looked at it yet. So we never heard a response back from those people as to what the legal department ever said, if anything. Because what they did, you can't do to a trust. A bank can't freeze a trust account, or a court can. A court has nothing to do with trust.
And we only have a 16/32 of the paperwork that was exchanged.
Well, that's true. There's a lot of paperwork that's been hidden that they've refused to present to us, because it shows back and forth where they negotiated between the courts and these lawyers, and the bank officer went on for over 4 months. And this guy Thorman, who's supposed to be like a court-appointed trustee from Nevada, that's all phonied up because they don't have any jurisdiction to appoint a trustee. And he was a friend of the judge's anyways and just a puppet that would do whatever the judge said. So he's a terrible trustee. He's not even close to being a trustee. But anyways, they have a lot of documents, a lot of emails that I know about that are reflected in various court hearings. They're mentioned. It's mentioned in the minutes of the court hearings and on the billing records that we've been able to obtain between a couple of these lawyers, talking back and forth every day, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, with various emails going which way and that way. And then the Thorman, who's the trustee's name, mentioned continuously, and several bank officers' names are mentioned. And they didn't like this phrase, they don't like that sentence, this word has to be changed. And this went on for like 4 months. And then one of the most apparent things that the judge in Nevada didn't like was paragraph number 6, that states that the choice of law, should there be any conflict over this agreement, be heard in New Hampshire as a choice of law. And the judge did not want to go for that at all, because that takes all the power away from this despicable, crooked judge. So he couldn't have that, so he was raising hell about that. And one of the lawyers, this Reutemann character, told the judge, well, the bank has to follow New Hampshire law or it's a deal breaker for them. So when the judge heard that, he said, oh, well, we got to get the money, so I guess we'll just approve the agreement. So that's what he did. The judge approved the agreement on the basis that the choice of law would be New Hampshire if anything came up to pass, that the bank had to pay this check. So that's the type of stuff that went on. And then I questioned the bank, because the bank knew that these were New Hampshire trusts. They knew that all these lawyers and everybody trying to get money out here to Nevada from the trust had nothing to do with the New Hampshire trust. And why does the bank demand that New Hampshire be the choice of law on a matter over the agreement they signed, when the choice of law in the trust was New Hampshire as well? Why didn't that come up before they did anything? Why didn't they just tell these lawyers to go pound sand? They don't have any jurisdiction in New Hampshire.
Well, why didn't they get a court order from from New Hampshire before they did anything. Said, I don't know what this has to do with, I don't know what Nevada has to do with New Hampshire, and I don't care. So you guys figure it out. Better yet, just sue Clark for having the check. Leave me out of it entirely.
Well, so many things were done that really can't be done, that are against the law, against federal codes, banking laws, and everything else. They've gone against a Supreme Court decision on trust law. I mean, every single thing that's been done between Nevada and New Hampshire is illegal. Every single thing. And the bank there is right at the head of the list. They've done the most illegal things because they've taken a family trust that they were entrusted with, or even beyond that, I gave them money and to buy a cashier's check, and I got that cashier's check for one purpose, and that was to protect the trust from an illegal activity that was being perpetrated against the trust from an illegal judge that was corrupt in Nevada, trying to do all these illegal things that were against the United States Supreme Court decision. So all the orders and everything that he was making from Nevada were not voidable. They were void because the Supreme Court had already weighed in. He had no jurisdiction. So everything that's been done has been done so poorly and so bad that everybody is scrambling around, hiding in the woodwork or whatever underneath their desks. And have any of the bank officers come out to talk to you? Has anyone asked to see you?
No.
What are they doing? Why not? You're a customer. You have in your control $1.5 million check that they have a binding responsibility to pay. Where are they? Where are these officers? Why are they not responding?
I've gone in the building, into the lobby twice, and asked for Robert and put phone calls into him. Upstairs, his little corporate office up there, and he refuses to come down. He refuses to take the phone call. He refuses to return the messages, and he also refuses to come downstairs in the lobby and meet me and explain his side and where they're at as a corporation in a corrupt bank.
Well, we've had responses from people before, and they kind of went along the lines that, well, we consider this matter over, so don't bother us anymore. And if you want to check with somebody, check with that lawyer out there in Nevada. So, okay, so let's see, the bank was robbed, and you want me to go check with the guy that robbed the bank. Oh, okay. You know, I mean, they're just a bunch of bozo clowns running that bank. What is wrong with these people? And where are the stockholders? And where is the board of trustees? Where are the people that are really in charge of this bank? What kind of clowns have they got running the show over there?
Right.
We've asked, I know I have, I think you have too, we've asked numerous bankers, presidents and what have you, people of authority in other banks in New Hampshire about stopping payment on a cashier's check. And they look at us like we're nuts. You can't stop payment on a cashier's check. And one bank president told us he has never in his entire career ever heard of a bank in New Hampshire anyways stopping payment on a cashier's check. He's never heard of such a thing. It can't be done. Well, it can be done if the check's been bona fidely lost, but this check's not lost. And the real speciousness of all this activity was that Susan Chikalis told these lawyers that they couldn't pay, could not stop payment on a cashier's check, and another bank officer told them the only way we can is if the check is lost, destroyed, or stolen. So these despicable, unethical lawyers and a judge here in Nevada said, oh, okay, well, we'll just put in an affidavit that the check's lost then. And a banker, I guess after getting an envelope stuffed full of cash, decided to go along with that, even though everybody at the bank knows the check wasn't lost. Everybody, the judges, the lawyer, everybody, every single person knows that I have the check. Every single one. And they sign an affidavit and do a fraudulent agreement where they claim that the check was lost. And then the agreement claims that if I end up enforcing that check through the courts and they have to pay it, that they're going to hold the trust responsible for paying the trust. If they have to pay the check, they're going to hold the trust responsible. Now, I don't know what kindergarten student they consulted with when they drew up this agreement, but it's a joke. It's a joke. And then they even go on to say where this agreement indemnifies all the culprits, all the people that broke the law, the judge, the lawyers, a court-appointed trustee, the supposed receiver, as the judge is calling him. That was an invalid appointment as well. All these players out in Nevada have been indemnified in the agreement. They're all hold harmless. Well, that's not an indemnification agreement that is supposed to make the bank indemnified and get reimbursed if they have to pay the check. And what do they say? They make themselves exempt, and they say, well, if you want to hold somebody responsible, hold Clark Feely responsible so you can sue him. I mean, I don't know who these people are. They're morons. There's no other way to describe them. And now they're so moronic, they won't even come down and discuss anything. And why is that? Because they can't. Why can you go to a big bank like that? I think it's one of the biggest in New England. It's the biggest non-national bank in New England. I mean, nationwide, I should say. They're only in the 3 or 4 states there in New England. But they're not as big as Bank of America or TD or some of those.
Not even.
But they're pretty big in New England. So you're in front of a national bank. They're federally controlled. They're FDIC insured. And you're standing out in front of their bank talking to their customers, telling them not to bank there. And nobody has come out and told you that you have to leave because you're, committing a felony against the bank. Why haven't they asked you to? Huh?
Slander.
Yeah, why haven't you been accused of anything?
Right.
I mean, you know why? Because you're not. Everything you're saying is the truth. So where are these people? Why aren't they talking to you? Because they think you're going to go away? Your family's owed over $1 million? And what we're fighting for is not the money. We're fighting for the home that we owned for 50 years, that our grandparents, your grandparents, had made for us. I mean, this is not even our money. It's dead people's money, and it's not money. It was a home. And this judge, this despicable, illegal Nevada judge, demanded or dictated that a home outside of his jurisdiction be sold to pay lawyers that practice in his court. And in this system out here in Nevada, these lawyers that practice before this judge also contribute campaign contributions to the judges here in Nevada. So this is a totally corrupt, wild, wild west situation here in Nevada that is absolutely despicable. And the whole thing has to be turned upside down by whoever. If it's going to take a federal action to the Department of Justice, what have you, these players need to be shut down because they're operating courts and so forth, and they're illegal. And back there in Connecticut, that bank needs to be shut down because trusts are very, very important to everybody in this country that has assets or wants to leave what they've created over their lifetime to their heirs, and they have every right to do that. And they create these trusts to house the assets in, so they're protected. Ha! That's a joke. They're only protected as far as the courts go. They have no power over trust, but the judge just does whatever he wants anyways. And then it takes you years and years as a victim of a judge that's out of control to straighten it out, because that's this deplorable system we have to live under. And then you have a bank. Well, what would stop the bank from taking your deposit and just giving it to anybody? They just give it to anybody. Now, what do you as a customer? Oh, I have a receipt. Yeah, well, we have a check for $1.5 million. Pay it. Oh, we're not going to pay it. Well, what do you do? I mean, what do you do, folks? A bank like that should be run out of Dodge because they cannot be a bank. They have absolutely no integrity whatsoever. They are worthless.
Right.
And we're talking about bona fide beneficiaries that inherited money from dead people. And that's what the bank goes after? I mean, how despicable can this guy Robert Trotman and Jack Barnes, who's the chief executive officer of that piece of crap bank back there, I mean, who are these people? I mean, they're despicable.
Yeah. I say we got to get rid of government and bring back the mafia.
Well,
At least when you make a deal with them, they stick to it.
that's right, and being out here in Nevada, we have a lot of, experience, if you will, with big hotels and casinos out here that at one time were mostly all controlled by the mafia, and back in the 70s and so forth. And I tell you what, you were born then, but I was here, and I dealt with a lot of those people just because my job was at these hotels. I wasn't a mafia guy, but I had to deal with them because that's basically who owned the hotels. And I'll tell you what, if those son of a bitches told you something, you could go to the bank on it. I mean, what they said, that's what it was, and boy, how refreshing.
Where these people don't.
Well, the problem is with the legal system that we have now is been hijacked by greedy, unethical lawyers whose only job in life is to get money any way they can. The whole system, their whole makeup of all these lawyers is, to me, a corrupt one. They all need to be thrown in jail. They're all corrupt organizations, and they're pathetic.
Right.
They'll lie. They'll say a check's stolen or lost or destroyed, and it's not. How do you that even? Why do we have a burden to even have to do anything? And when you get a cashier's check, the law reads under UCC regulations that the bank has a burden to pay that check. So how do they flip that on someone else? How do they do that?
Right.
And then you have a corrupt court system, or you have an incompetent court system. Both are just equally as bad, where a judge in New Hampshire there ruled that a court in Nevada has assumed control over a Nevada trust. Well, you can't do that, Mr. Judge. What are you pointing to that allows that? Well, no one's asked us to look into that. And he was right, I'd never asked a court of law in New Hampshire to look into that because it was irrelevant. The cashier's check dictates that it has cash equivalency. And if I have the cashier's check, it's as good as cash, and the bank has to honor it. What does a court thing out in Nevada have to do with that? Nothing. It's totally irrelevant.
Right.
And I got to tell that to the judge? And by virtue of the fact that I didn't ask the judge to rule on something that was irrelevant, and that's my fault, and he rules against me because I didn't ask him to rule on something he never had no business ruling on to start with? I mean, what's wrong with these incompetents? What do these judges do? Just think about their next golf game? Well, how do they operate? They have no legal knowledge. I think judges, for the most part, are lawyers that could never pay the bills. So they decided to get a job where they get a paycheck because they couldn't make it on their own.
Right. Three-time losers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyways, how'd you leave it with those two gals that you talked to? What were their jobs? Do you know?
Well, yeah, one of them works in the trust department.
Could they explain the word trust to you?
Giving it up. The other one wouldn't give up what her gig was. I didn't ask her, but she didn't volunteer it either.
I wonder, why didn't you ask the girl what the word trust means?
Right. Well, I told her, I said, if both parties, the plaintiffs and the defendant, if both of them can get attorney fees from the trust, a trust would be more worthless than not having one. You'd be better off.
Right, because this way you're identified where the assets are, which identified them to the to the lawyers, so they can look it up and see how much money they got to work with. That's what these lawyers do anyways. If they get a case, they go to lunch together, both sides, and they, over lunch, have a little discussion. How much money does your client have? How much does yours have? Oh, well, you can do this motion, and I'll do this answer, and you can do this, and I'll do that, and then that's worth this and that. And then, so they figure out how much money they're going to get, and that's what they do. And like a bailiff told us in court one day that these cases usually end when the plaintiff or the defendant runs out of money. And that's what happens. And it's a corrupt just ridiculous system that needs to be changed somehow.
Yeah.
And what you go through in the process, and why you have a burden when you've gotten a cashier's check to protect something and the bank just pays your money to somebody else. I mean, that's outrageous. And that's how it's so outrageous how you can get away with what you're doing in front of a bank, mouthing off about how despicable the bank is. Any business, you go to any business and you start mouthing off about the business, you're going to have people out there trying to shoo you away. But you don't in this case.
Right.
And that in and of itself means a lot. I hope the people
Right.
that see that you're there day in and day out realize, you know, why is this guy still here? They're not doing anything about it. Yeah, they can't do anything about it.
Right.
So it's a ridiculous situation.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. Well, I guess I'm going to go get some food. I'm working on going on my 10th hour here now.
And you think you deserve some
Thanks.
food?
Well, I might as well not eat. I tell you, I love the Connecticut people out here, but these people ain't got a clue about food.
Oh. Well, call up your
Almost
buddy there, Robert
going
Troutman,
to-
have him send you down a sandwich. I'm sure they got a kitchen in that building somewhere.
They do.
Yeah, have them send you down a sandwich for your $1.5 million.
They won't even send me a phone call.
Yeah. Despicable people.
Yeah.
But anyways.
All right, well, sounds good. We'll keep up the good work.
All right, well, we're making a record of all this, so we have a lot of stuff on tape and disc and whatever, digitized, what have you. So we'll be able to follow up with all kinds of productions, if you will, to where we get this word out to stockholders and board of directors and everything else, and how despicable the courts are, and getting a nice record going for the Department of Justice and everything else. So we'll see where it goes, but heads are going to have to roll because laws have been broken. And last I heard, we still attempt to be, anyways, a country of laws. And, you know, we'll see. It sure doesn't look like it now, except unless you're a little old lowly town clerk in Kentucky that goes to jail over, you know, refusing to sign a marriage license for two gay people. You know, this country is in bad shape. And you got a guy named Robert Troutman and Jack Barnes at that bank that won't even return a phone call to somebody they ripped off $1.5 million for. That's why they won't call, because they know they're guilty. But maybe some stockholder or some institutional stockholder will get them on the phone someday. And that's what I'm working on, because we know who they are. They're larger than 5% of any corporation, publicly traded corporation, like that bank is. The stockholders and the institutions have to be noted, and I know who the stockholders are that own more than 5% of that bank, and they are being contacted as we speak.
Yep. Sounds good. We'll keep it up. I'll talk to you here shortly.
All right. Thanks for checking in there. You're doing good things back there.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. I'll talk to you then. Take care.
Bye. Well, that was an interesting update from our man on the street back there in Connecticut. He's doing a good job. He's been on site there now going on a couple of weeks, and he's talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people are just amazed at what's transpired here, because the people in Connecticut, they seem to be fairly adept at the intelligence level, and most of them have said, well, you can't, that can't be done. You know, and well, I'll tell you what, folks, if you think your money's safe in this bank, you better think again. And banks like that need to have every customer just show up and take their money out of there before it's too late. And the system in this country is just extremely vulnerable right now when you have things like this that go on, and courts that go right along with it. I mean, the bank is using an excuse, which is not an excuse. A bank has their own legal department, and they have an obligation to protect their customers and the money that they've been entrusted with. Well, the bank failed miserably in this particular case, And not only that, it was over and above a customer's account because they'd already been paid in cash for this check that they issued using their full faith and credit. So they're responsible to pay this check, and they've been paid to pay the check. And that doesn't mean they can just pay somebody else. How do you do that? So they listened to a bunch of crooked, unethical lawyers who used the money that the bank paid them to pay themselves. I mean, I just don't get this. How can this even happen in America? This sounds like a third world Soviet country more than anything else to me. It's absolutely crazy. But that's what we're up against, folks. People that are incompetence to one level, and they make these mistakes, and then they're not man enough or intelligent enough to correct the mistake and do the right thing. They hide behind their desk and their phones. They won't answer the phone. They won't return a call. They won't come down and meet anybody in the lobby. These are just despicable, despicable people. And what we're doing is we know what's happened. We know the system is broken. We know that these banks committed felonies. We know that the judge committed felonies. And we're not going to stop until the law is upheld. And we can have the wherewithal, fortunately, to keep on going. And we're going to making a record. We have capabilities to record everything that we do. And we're making a verifiable, provable production effort, if you will, that can be given to various entities and have this exposed. And I think at some point this will become a national issue because it's so important. Because it's not just about us and our family and what happened. It could happen to anybody, and it goes to several levels. We have that clerk in Kentucky that goes to jail because she didn't follow a Supreme Court ruling. Well, this judge in Nevada is not following a Supreme Court ruling. So why is he any less jailable than this clerk in Kentucky? I contend that he's more jailable because what he did is considered a high crime because he's in high authority. He certainly has a higher authority than that clerk in Kentucky, and she goes to jail for not signing a marriage license. And this judge in Nevada signs an order to a federally chartered bank that's FDIC insured. The order said to this bank, dictated that they don't pay the check and that it's in the best interest of the beneficiaries if the money is sent to Nevada so that it can be dispersed, I guess, to these lawyers. And the judge contended that that was in the best interest of the beneficiaries. Are you kidding me? So just take your money that you're entitled to in a spendthrift trust that's protected for you for whenever you get it. In the meantime, nobody can touch that money. A judge can't dictate that it be paid to anybody. That's against the law. But this judge did it. And that's in the best interest of the beneficiaries. This judge is pathetic. He's totally lawless. And I'll tell you what, I mean, you know, he didn't run for re-election and for supposed health reasons. But I mean, this judge did so many things wrong in this particular case. He completely lost control of his court, and he couldn't serve anymore on the bench anyways because he is totally, totally incapable of handling any case of this nature. He admitted openly that he did not have experience in trust matters. He never handled a case as a lawyer or as a judge. So how does this guy even consider himself qualified to even sit on a bench and hear a case like this? Of course, originally the case wasn't a trust case. It was put before the court just to get access to bank records. So it wasn't a trust case, but a lawyer for the defendant had no way of being paid. So he hijacked this whole affair, made it a muddy mess to be able to increase his fees and get a payday. That's all this lawyer ever did. He's an ambulance chaser. He is the lowest of low of lawyers. You can't get lower than this guy. And that's what he did. Of course, that's the type of people that my sister attracts. or fines because she's totally low life herself. But anyways, good to hear from Aaron that he's still kicking back there in Connecticut, and hope he gets something to eat. And we'll be signing off soon here. I actually have to go file a whole bunch of paperwork with the discipline board here in Nevada because I'm bringing this latest judge up before the complaint commission and discipline because he broke the law. He awarded, this is a good one, he awarded lawyers fees that submitted bills on this particular case. The bills they submitted were bills that were incurred for objecting to the appeal that I put in, which is before the Supreme Court, which is up for a decision. It hasn't been decided yet. And the law or the provisions of the judicial procedure here in Nevada is that no attorney fees can be awarded until a decision's made. And then fees usually, if they're awarded at all, are only awarded to the prevailing party, not the non-prevailing party. That's called the American rule. And however, when you're dealing with anything associated with a trust awarded legal fees are dictated by statute. And in statutes in both Nevada and New Hampshire, legal fees are not awardable from the corpus of a trust. So whatever's being done from day one in this particular case concerning a trust from out of state and so forth, every single thing the court and everybody has done has been illegal. Every single thing that the courts have done, they don't have jurisdiction to do. That is a pathetic court system. And it's a pathetic system because what they put through in this case, I am the prevailing plaintiff, and I am listed on the case as the judgment creditor. So I'm the one that's awardable fees, no one else is. And what do? They continue to award fees to these lawyers that you went before the court with this, despicable motion to have fees awarded to them, actually represent the defendant's lawyer who died. They are the estate attorneys for this dead lawyer. But what they found out in doing whatever they do, that, hey, wait a minute, Judge Earl set up a slush fund of $400,000 for future legal fees that this dead attorney was going to feed off for a while. And why can't we just replace him, step in his shoes, and say, hey, we're handling this case now, so we want these fees. Well, A, you're not entitled to anything yet because the appeal hasn't been decided. And so they were out of order for doing that. And the judge was even less out of order for awarding them any fees. The money that they're trying to get fees from was illegally obtained through bank fraud from an out-of-state bank that the court had no jurisdiction to do. The court order that was signed said things that it was in the best interest of the beneficiaries. That was a lie. And that the money needed to be returned to Nevada. The money was never in Nevada. That's a lie. So every single thing that's been done has been done wrong. And now we have this William Gephardt stepping into the shoes of Judge Earl and awarding more fees to lawyers that have no standing to get anything. But the court's totally, totally corrupt. And they're doing illegal things. So anyways, I have the documents and paperwork and everything ready to present to the commission, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully they're going to reprimand the judge and make sure the judge doesn't award any more fees from this illegal funds that have been set up. In the meantime, the Department of Justice and so forth are looking into what charges need to be filed in this case, especially particular acts that have been done under the color of law, which particularly heinous because under the color of law, violations are done like with a robe, and you have high authority, and you should be the last person in the world committing crimes because you're the one taking an oath to uphold the law, and here you are breaking the law. So anyways, folks, that's where we are. Glad I had the opportunity to bring you up to date. And check in tomorrow, and we'll continue and bring you up to date what else is going on. So thanks for listening. Listen to The Herd every day, Monday through Friday from 2 to 3 o'clock. Thanks for listening. Clark out.